Today our topic is actually a message of compassion and connection. How to respond to a crying baby. However, it may be something a little uncomfortable for some of us. Something a lot of us have heard or been told to do, and something that, if we're being honest, a lot of us have actually done. Letting a baby cry alone in the dark until they stop.
Before we go any further, I want to be clear about something because this is important and I need you to hear it before anything else we say today. This is not a judgmental conversation. If you've done this, if you were told it was the right thing, if you were exhausted and desperate and a pediatrician or a book or your own mother recommended a method that promised you sleep, we understand. We've both been in places that felt desperate, and you were doing your best with what you had.
What we want to do today is show you what is actually happening in that small brain when a baby cries and no one responds. Not to make you feel guilty, but to give you accurate information the next time someone tells you to let them cry. You will have an answer.
A lot of us had a night that was really hard when we were running on almost no sleep and the baby had been crying on and off for hours, and maybe someone we trusted says something like, "Let him cry it out tonight, just one night." He needs to learn that crying does not always work, and we might even feel a little bit manipulated by them. We know that when we pick up the baby, he'll stop almost immediately. He'll be relieved. Maybe it's just tiredness or our tendency to overthink things, but we've all considered letting them cry until they tire themselves out.
But really, what we're teaching them when we do not come? And the answer, it turns out, is something that neuroscience can now show us very clearly. What a baby learns when no one comes is whether or not the world answers. That is the lesson they're taking in, and it can have a lasting effect. Let us start with the basics, because there is so much confusion around this, and a lot of it comes from a very simple misunderstanding of what a baby's cry actually is.
A baby's cry is not a performance or a negotiation tactic or attempt to control or manipulate. They don't have these concepts or abilities yet, so it's more of a biological reaction after all other attempts fail.
Think about what babies actually have when they're born. They have needs and experiences, hunger, pain, temperature, overstimulation, loneliness, fear, the disorienting newness of being outside a body that was all they have ever known. They have all of those things, and they have one tool, one signal, one way of saying something is not okay, I need help. That is what a cry is. It is a need, expressed the only way a baby can express it.
So when we ask, why is the baby crying? We're asking exactly the right question. And when we try to understand, to decode the signal and figure out what kind of cry it is, we're doing exactly the right thing.
But if we ask, how do I make this stop? We start in the wrong direction. That question treats the cry as a problem to be managed rather than a message to be understood. And those two things lead to very different places.
We need to talk about the belief of manipulation because it does a lot of damage and it's based on a complete misunderstanding of how a baby's brain works.
Manipulation is a very specific thing. It requires two capacities that are actually quite sophisticated. The first is the ability to plan ahead, to think, if I do this, I will get that. To hold a future state in your mind and work backward from it. The second is what psychologists call theory of mind. The understanding that other people have minds separate from your own, that there is a you and a me, and that each of us has different thoughts, feelings, and information.
Babies have not yet developed either of these two skills. The part of the brain responsible for planning, for holding future scenarios in their mind and working toward them, is in the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't begin to develop meaningfully until they're around age 4 or 5. and it doesn't finish developing until a person is in their mid-20s.
Theory of mind, the understanding that other people have separate minds, emerges somewhere between the ages of 3 and 5 years old in most children. Before that, children are genuinely not aware in any consistent way that your experience is different from theirs.
A 2-month-old baby is not planning anything. A 6-month-old is not planning a scheme. They're experiencing some real needs: hunger, pain, fear, loneliness. And because they can't speak, they're sending the only signals they have. To call that manipulation is not only inaccurate, but it's also completely incorrect.
Then we need to ask ourselves what kind of response we want to deliver. One where the crying is seen as an alarm and gets answered, or one where we have learned to tune it out. A baby's cry, from an evolutionary perspective, is designed to be irresistible, reaching between 110 and 120 decibels, which is the same decibel range as a siren. Its high-pitched, fluctuating frequencies trigger areas of the adult brain associated with alertness and anxiety, prompting a rapid response to urgent needs.
So we want to pause here for a moment and acknowledge something, because we know that some of you are watching this and thinking, well, it really does feel like they're doing it on purpose. It really does feel like they wait until I am able to sit down, like they know exactly when I'm about to fall asleep.
Well, that feeling is real, and there's a reason for it that has nothing to do with manipulation. Babies are exquisitely tuned to the emotional state of their caregivers, because reading adult emotional states is a survival skill. A calm, present adult means safety. A tense, distracted adult means something might be wrong. And when the adult relaxes, when you finally sit down, the baby's nervous system notices, and whatever was simmering gets expressed.
It's not, I waited until you sat down to cry. It's, I felt you relax, and now it's safe to let you know how I'm actually feeling. This is where the distinction lies between alleged manipulation and co-regulation. One of the most extraordinary things about how babies and parents work together.
We now have some really important information to share with you, something that honestly changed how both of us thought about this when we first encountered it in the research. Let's learn about what is happening in a baby's brain and body when they cry, and what happens when no response comes.
When a baby cries and experiences distress, their body activates what is called the stress response system. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, is released. Heart rate increases. Blood pressure rises. The body goes into a state of heightened alert.
Now, some stress is completely normal and even healthy. Researchers call it tolerable stress, the kind that happens when something is hard or frustrating, but a supportive adult is present or nearby. For instance, it could be hearing a barking dog or other loud noises. Tolerable stress, in the right doses, is actually part of how we build resilience. It is a challenge within safety.
But there's a second kind. Researchers call it toxic stress. And toxic stress is what happens when the stress response is prolonged, intense, and, this is the critical part, that there's no supportive adult to help the child regulate it. In other words, the crying is going off and no one is coming, and it keeps going and it keeps going.
Toxic stress, experienced repeatedly in early childhood, does measurable things to the developing brain. It makes the stress response system more sensitive, easier to trigger, harder to turn off. It affects the development of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that manages emotional regulation and impulse control. It affects memory. It affects the body's immune system.
We want to say this carefully and compassionately because we know it is a hard thing to hear. We're not saying that one bad night ruins everything, A baby's brain is resilient, and repair is always possible. But think about this question: what does it cost to not respond? The real answer is it does have costs, and the research shows that these effects can persist for decades.
And knowing that can help us to change the question. It moves from, will I spoil this baby if I go to them, to, what does my baby need right now? That is a much better question to be asking.
Here is something that we find genuinely beautiful. Not just interesting, beautiful. Babies cannot calm themselves down. They're born without that capacity. It has to develop. And the way it develops, the only way, is through what researchers call co-regulation.
Co-regulation means this: when a baby is distressed, a calm adult comes close. They pick the baby up. They hold them against their chest. They speak softly or hum or just breathe. And their own nervous system, which is regulated, which has years of practice at this, begins to communicate with the baby's nervous system, which is not through words, not through any deliberate action, through presence, through warmth, through the rhythm of a calm heartbeat next to a fast one.
And slowly, not immediately, not magically, the baby's stress response begins to calm down. Cortisol drops, heart rate slows down, the sense of alarm begins to quiet.
This happens hundreds of times, thousands of times over the first months and years of a child's life. And what accumulates from all of that repetition is what researchers call self-regulation. The baby's brain is learning, I was distressed, someone came, it got better, I survived this. And with each repetition, the pathway gets stronger. The child's own capacity to manage distress begins to grow.
You can't rush this. You can't teach it by withholding comfort. A nervous system learns to regulate by being regulated over and over by a regulated adult. That is the sequence. There's no shortcut through it.
And here is what moves us the most about this. You do not have to be a perfect parent or respond every single time within seconds or do it flawlessly. What matters is the pattern, the overall message that a child receives across thousands of ordinary moments. And the message that matters most is this: when I reach out, the world responds. I am not alone in this.
That message, built slowly through ordinary responses, becomes a foundation for every relationship the child will ever have. Their relationships with other people, their relationships through difficulty, their relationships with handling their own emotions. It all starts here in these moments that feel so small and actually are not small at all.
We want to take a moment to talk about what this looks like in real life, because we're aware that some of you are listening to this and thinking, this all sounds beautiful, but I have a 2-year-old and a job, and I've not slept properly in 18 months. What does co-regulation look like on a Thursday at 6 in the morning?
It looks like going to them when they cry, even when you're tired. It looks like picking them up and not immediately trying to fix whatever it is, but just being there first, letting your presence be the first thing. It looks like sitting on the floor next to the toddler who's having a meltdown and not trying to stop the emotion, but also not adding to it. Staying calm, staying close, just staying.
It looks like saying, I am here, even when you do not know what else to say. It does not require anything elaborate. It requires presence, warmth, consistency, the willingness to come back even after hard moments. That is co-regulation, and that's what builds a brain. In many Spanish-speaking families across Latin America, Spain, or the Hispanic community, there is a phrase that gets passed down across generations, and that is somewhat more commonplace than in other regions. Déjalo, llorar. Let them cry. It is good for their lungs. They need to learn. It is not good to be so attached to the mother. They need to be strong.
We respect tradition. We genuinely do. We know that traditions carry love, even when they carry traditions whose origins we might not know, or why they are the way they are. And the people who say these things, the grandmothers, the aunts, the well-meaning neighbors, they love children. They probably have had several, and I'm sure they've had plenty of experience. But it falls to us to look at the tradition honestly and ask, is this one worth keeping? This is where it's crucial to listen to your own inner wisdom.
The lungs do not strengthen from crying alone. There is no research that supports that. What strengthens from unresponded crying is the neural pathway of distress without relief, and that is not something we want to build.
We want to build what we want to strengthen through response and warmth and consistent presence is the pathway for the baby to feel safe. The pathway becomes self-worth, trust, the capacity to reach out to others throughout a lifetime, in friendship, in love, in moments of real need.
Déjalo, llorar teaches babies that their signals do not work. We would like to offer something different.
There is a specific situation we have not talked about yet, and we want to, because it comes up constantly and because it's where the guilt tends to be the heaviest. What about when you have done everything? You've fed them, you've changed them, you've held them, you've walked them, sung to them, and they're still crying. And you're so exhausted and so depleted that you're starting to cry too.
First, that is real. That happens. It happened to me. It happens to every parent at some point. It is one of the hardest experiences in early parenting. The feeling of having nothing left and being needed anyway. We know that feeling.
And we want to say this clearly. It's okay to put a baby down in a safe place like a crib or a flat surface and step away for a few minutes. Take a breath, drink something, call someone. A few minutes of crying while you recover is not the same as a method of letting them cry until they give up. It's the parent who's recognizing that they're at their limit and doing what they need to do to be able to come back.
It is regulated parents that regulate babies. You cannot co-regulate from a place of complete dysregulation yourself. Taking care of yourself in those moments is not abandoning your baby. It is taking care of the system that takes care of them.
And we also want to say this. If the crying is relentless and nothing you do helps and you are genuinely at a loss, please talk to a doctor. Persistent, inconsolable crying in infants can have medical explanations. It's not a failure of attachment. It's a signal that something may need attention, so get that support.
So let us talk about the long view, the long-term relationship between you and your child. Because all of this, neuroscience, co-regulation, the stress response, it can feel very clinical, and we want to bring it back to something more simple.
When you respond to your baby's cry, you're not just addressing the moment, you're building a relationship. You're building a history between two people, a history of you reached out and I came, over and over again, until that history becomes something your child carries internally.
The child who grows up knowing that their needs matter, who have internalized at a very deep level that reaching out gets a response. Those children become adults who know how to ask for help, who can tolerate vulnerability, who trust enough to love and be loved. Those are not small things. That is everything.
And the children who learn early that crying doesn't work, that needs are inconvenient, and that distress should be managed privately, those children learn to shut down, to not reach out, and they carry that into their adult relationships. And we're not talking about personality. We're talking about patterns laid down in developing brain before a child has any way to understand or to choose what is happening to them.
You are not just responding to a cry. You are shaping a nervous system. You're teaching a human being whether the world is a place where reaching out is worth it. That is the weight of it, and we think parents deserve to know that.
And before we close, we want to say something to the parents who are watching this and feeling something conflicted. Maybe guilt because of times you didn't go, because of the message you tried, because of things you were told to do that you now wish you hadn't done.
We want to sit with that for just a moment because we know it is there.
You didn't know. You were doing the best you could with what you had at the time. That is not a phrase that we use to let people off the hook. It's a true thing. Parents love their children. They don't want to withhold comfort because they want to cause harm. They do it because they were told it was the right thing, because they were exhausted and they needed something, anything to work, or because no one gave them a different answer.
And children are forgiving. Neurologically, developmentally, they are built to want to reconnect with you. The brain is plastic. The relationship can heal. You do not have to earn your way back through perfection. You just have to go back to be present now. The research on repair is clear. Parents who rupture and repair, who make mistakes and come back, raise children who are more resilient, not less, because those children learn that relationships survive hard moments, that love is not conditional on everything going right.
And if you're carrying guilt today, let it become information, not punishment. Let it tell you something about what you want going forward, and then put it down. What matters is not what happened before. What matters is what you do with what you know now.
We want to leave you with something simple, something you can hold on to the next time it's 2 a.m. and you're not sure what to do. Every time you respond to your baby's cry, you're sending a message, an experience, in the felt sense of what happens when they reach out. It's felt profoundly by your baby on many levels. The message is this: you matter, I am here, you're not alone.
Those 3 things, you matter, I'm here, you're not alone, repeated across thousands of ordinary moments, become the foundation of a person. Their sense of their own worth, their capacity for trust, their belief that the world is a place where it is worth reaching out. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep coming back, and that is enough.
We invite you to please visit the website and listen to the free gift audiobook.
And next week, we're going to talk about, does all of this, the closeness, the responsiveness, the attachment, make children too dependent? Does it create kids who can't handle the world on their own? We'll see you then. Thank you for being here.